thing. You know, certainly take that opportunity. A specific piece of advice that I think can help you kind of manage what you have to create in your proposal is to really make sure to leverage resources for creating the educational component. So I'm sure at many universities, there's already existing programs with existing mechanisms in place to assess the quality of the educational, you know, aspects of what your proposal is. And even NHERI, you know, the NCO has tools for that. So, you know, don't try to reinvent the wheel with some of your kind of educational aspects of your proposal. Really leverage and use resources that are available. I have other things I could say, but I'll turn it over to other panelists at this point. And happy to add more later, you know, if it comes up.
Thank you for being with us, Jennifer. And yes, we'll have plenty of time to talk about other aspects. So thank you for your introduction and for being here. Next up is Dr. Chowdhury, Arindam.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Karina. Yeah, so my advice would be like focus on the integration of the research and the education, which is very important, which often we miss because we are all researchers. So that part is very important, and it shouldn't seem like disjointed. It should be very well related to each other, like feeding back into each other and integrated. That's one of the main criteria for NSF career proposals. And the best advice that I got during my career is from a consultant who came here for a workshop, and he said, like, you know, you should start reading educational journals as you read research journals, because I never did that. And that really reflects, because they know that we are just trying to put a boilerplate of we are going to do this, we are going to build courses, blah, 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 but we don't identify the educational need. But if you read those journals, you'll see plenty of innovations happening. What are the current challenges and everything? So it's American Association of, I think it's called AA, what is it called? Journal of American Engineering, Education and Engineering. There are a few of them. So look at those journals and try to read those. I think very helpful. And start early, like start reading it 1 year before you plan to submit the proposal. That's all.
Thank you, Arindam. I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of trouble with the mute button. Next up is Dr. Tasha Gouda, and Dr. Gouda is here with us.
I'll try to project so all of you can hear me, but Associate Professor of Biomedical Engineering and Chemical Engineering. And since the first two speakers talked about the teaching aspect of it, as well as how to integrate the teaching, the research, I'll talk about the research part of it. I think the best advice I got also went hand in hand with that. It is to think about the research aspect being what your contribution is going to be to the field. And that's kind of what the rest of that grant is packaged around, right? So from the NSF's perspective, if the idea is that they're funding the next generation of scholar teachers or education and research put together in faculty roles, they want to see how that's going to advance the science in your field. So it's not just an incremental advance, but from a philosophical standpoint, what exactly are you going to contribute back to your field, or how are you going to push the boundary on it? And that was a pretty tricky question for me personally to answer, mostly because a lot of the research, at least in my head, was applied. And I'm like, well, the application is how I'm pushing it. So forcing me to refocus on what the core essence was of contributions to the field, not just in terms of my contributions from a papers or product perspective, took a lot of thinking. And that would be my advice, to think about that early and soon, and actually believe some of the essays we write about what our research statements are going to be, would be a great place to start.
Thank you, Teja. And Next up is also one of our in-person panelists, Dr. Gabriela Romero Uribe.
Hello, so I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Medical Engineering and Chemical Engineering. And I agree with everything that has been said. Maybe the only point that they are missing is the outreaching also. NSF in the career is looking for outreaching. How are you going to deliver all that knowledge? Okay, you are delivering in your classroom, but how it is going to go beyond your classroom? And they are looking for that too. So, and then when you think about your research, you are thinking about ideas that maybe are very advanced to deliver directly to your community. So you need to find the proper mechanism to deliver that research information to the general community.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriela. And last but not least, our panelists, and this is in alphabetical order by last name, Dr. Elena Sutley is virtual.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Karina. Yes, I'm Elena Sutley. I'm assistant professor in civil engineering at the University of Kansas. You know, what advice would I give is that, you know, this is a special type of proposal, right? It needs to be a 5-year project, which is a pretty big project to last 5 years. But it's your career project. So it needs to be clear, like what you will get done in 5 years, what you're going to work on in 5 years, but also how this work can clearly be extended to keep you going for the lifetime of your career, right? Because that's the point of this funding, is to launch your career. And so thinking about it and conveying it in a very straightforward way is, you know, these are the objectives we're executing during the 5-year project. And this is what I see beyond the 5-year project, right? And how this is going to really just launch my career in that direction. And then the best advice that I think that I got when I was working on this is, you know, I definitely, this is, I guess it kind of builds off of some of the other advice that you've heard, that, you know, leverage existing programs, but also, you know, make sure that you propose things that you want to do, right? And so, because your excitement about your activities, about the research, about the education, about the outreach, all of it, your excitement about those activities is conveyed in your writing. And so if you're just doing it because it's low-hanging fruit, or if you're just doing it because it just, like, you know, it's there, you know, that's going to convey. So make sure it's something that you want to do, because you're going to be able to convince reviewers that much better that it's important if you like it too. But also, I mean, hopefully you'll be able to do these activities, right? And so you want to enjoy what you're doing for 5+ years as well. So I think that was some of the best advice I got. Thanks, Karina.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists for being here and for taking part in our Summer Institute panel. I'll start with some of the questions that were submitted earlier. How many times did you try applying before being successful? I guess we can go backwards. Elaina, you want to start? How many times did you apply for the career award before being successful?
Sure, I was really lucky, I guess, and I just tried one time, and it worked out really well. So that was nice.
Gabriela?
I applied 2 times.
Teja?
2 as well.
2. Arindam?
I got it in the 3rd time.
3rd time. And Arindam, there's a limit, I think, for three times, correct?
3, yeah, 3 is the limit.
Okay. Did you feel the pressure on that last time?
No, I didn't feel the pressure on the last time, because I think I already got a bunch of NSF projects before that anyway. However, the lesson I learned from, again, as I think Elaina kind of described very clearly, is NSF career proposal is totally a different kind of proposal. It's not like a regular unsolicited kind of proposal. And I didn't understand that in the first two times. I just had a research idea, which is kind of okay. But the education part was pretty much a boilerplate. So they can clearly see through it like, okay, there's a bunch of things that he's proposing, but doesn't have a lot of connections to anything. And I did that for 2 times, didn't succeed. And then this gentleman came and gave a workshop. And he taught about all these things, like how need to read education papers, how need to integrate the research, find a right educational need. Like in my career, never had a graduate student funded. It was all about undergraduates. But I found that need reading journal papers, like there is a huge retention problem with undergraduates, and there is a particular way of teaching, which is active learning. And I integrated that into the research. And then Elaina has pointed out, like you have to think 20 years, 15 years, and that needs to come out of the proposal. This is not like a one-time kind of thing. They want to see that you are going to become the leader in your field, and you have a good roadmap of that, and that's clearly reflected. So once I got all these pieces together, then the third time, so I could see like where I went wrong and what was really needed, because career is totally different than any other proposal.
That's great perspective. Thank you, Arindam. And Jennifer, how many times did you apply before you were successful?
So it also took me 3 tries. And I will also echo what Elena said, which is, so I actually got good feedback on the educational aspect of my proposal the first few times, but I just wasn't excited about the research, like the actual research topic I had proposed. And by the time the 3rd time came around, I really found something I knew it just felt different. It all came together. I felt really good about the research idea. So I felt pressure, but I also felt really good, integrating the feedback from the previous, submissions, but then also just really finding a topic that I was excited about.
Great. So thank you all for your responses. And a follow-up question on that, and I think Rindum has answered it, is if you submitted multiple times, what were the major differences between the first version and the funded version, so the funded proposal? So I think the only lucky one was Elaina who submitted the first time. But what did you, those of you who submitted, so Gabriela and Teja, you submitted twice, so maybe you can talk about some of those comparisons. And Jennifer, you kind of talked about this, but I don't know if there's other things too that you want to also incorporate.
Let me start. So I kind of submitted, well, I had never written to the NSF ever before, because most of my funding comes from NIH and DOD. So the first proposal I ever wrote to the NSF was my first career proposal. I didn't even think about the teaching aspect. I kind of wanted to find a research idea. I actually cared about the basic science for, so that was my first attempt. I thought I was doing a lot of teaching, and then the reviews came back and told me that you're expected to do a lot of teaching. So you're not telling me what you're adding to your teaching in terms of integrating it or in terms of outreach, 2 points that have been raised by other panelists before. And I took the critiques for what they were. I didn't touch my research plan the second year. It was submitted verbatim. And I completely rehashed the teaching to actually make teaching and outreach to make it make sense. Understood, as Arindam pointed out, that you needed assessments. Ultimately, we are quantitative people writing to the NSF. So how do you think about the metrics of success? How do you think about how the teaching is going to feed off of the research and vice versa? So the second attempt was basically a complete rehash to make it fit together. That would be the biggest change. So yes.
Yeah, for me, well, it took me a year to just think about the idea, and then I attended a lot of workshops, and I had the knowledge that the career was something different, where I have to integrate research with education, with outreach. So for the first time, I kind of have all together, but I think I had a lot of fear to share my my proposal for external review. And maybe the way that I have written it or that I have integrated was not clear for everyone. And that was one of my major critiques for the second round. Then I had everyone reviewing my career. I work with an external company that helped me to organize the proposal. And the first and the second time of my career, the content was basically the same, but was organized in a different way that was more understandable and had a better organization and a better flow. And then also I had also to the university, I had some external scientific reviewers that were able to give me specific feedback or which details are missing, which details are necessary, and all that kind of things.
I'll add that one of the major, besides the research idea shifting, I guess I'll kind of repeat what I said earlier. The major difference the third time was I had way more people reading it. I'm kind of thankful here at the University of Florida, our college has a program where we, have mock panels and peer review, and we just have a lot of opportunity for feedback, and that ultimately just made a better, more readable, more cohesive proposal. So again, get as many people to read it as you can and really take the feedback to heart.
Thank you. So another question was related to budgets. What percentage of budgets go to salaries, experiments, computational work? What are some unexpected costs that you encountered? So I guess considerations for the financial aspect of it. Whoever wants to start.
I'll start. My budget was weird. What I mean by that is I do experimental tissue engineering. So the experimental costs are astronomical. One experiment usually runs me about 40 grand in supplies, just plain supplies. So my summer salary supported on my career is 2 days. So I had to talk to my program officer to explain that within the $500,000, the research won't get done if I put in more money for salary. So I had a very weird budget. So with that being said, that's very, very different. Having worked with colleagues who work more on the computational side of things, it's night and day. So it's really, really different across disciplines and across fields. The advice I would have from that is talk to your program manager and explain why you're doing things a certain way, because that doesn't necessarily come across in the grant itself. And if you are doing things like that, please make sure your budget justification explains the rationale. Because the career is supposed to protect your time. So my budget justification explicitly said why I had my budget a certain way, which might not be what the panel was expecting from a career proposal.
Thank you, Teja. Others who want to chime in?
Yeah, I can add to that. So I think there is a limit of the budget. I think you have to check the current limit. I think now it's like 500 or 600,000, something like that. Depends on the discipline also. I think biology is different from engineering. What is important is you make sure that whatever you're talking in the proposal, you have backup budget for that. For example, when I had undergrad students, I'm saying that, I will have 10 undergrad students mentored over the years and things. I make sure that I include budget and describing the budget justification that this is the rate that we are going to pay. This is how many students I'm looking for. So that justification is important. There are comments I've seen in other proposals where they put workshops or teachers and things, but nothing in the budget item, and that raises a red flag. So whatever you put details, either on your education or research experiments, model building, make sure that you account for all the budget so it looks very realistic and it goes hand in hand with your scope of work. That's all.
I had to pull up my budget so that I could try to help give some of those specific answers. So I budgeted for 2 GRAs for almost the full time. So for almost 2 GRAs for almost 5 years. I think it was like 4 and 5 years. So that was a large chunk of my budget, you know, after fringe, after you know, tuition. It was, you know, that's half the budget right there. So that was a majority of mine. And otherwise, I guess one thing with my budget is, you know, I budgeted for some of the education outreach tasks like Arindam's talking about. So one of the things I wanted to do was highlight women who are leaders in the field. It was an approach to, you know, overcome this apparent glass ceiling, some real and apparent glass ceiling for female students to see themselves in leadership positions. And so anyways, I had a little over $8,000 budgeted. So about $1,600 a year to bring speakers into the University of Kansas. So that was one thing, you know, that's minor proportion of the $500,000. And the advice I would give though is do talk to, you know, this is definitely where it's super important to talk to people, like exactly what you've already heard, you know, understanding what research materials and supplies, what your education task, you know, what things cost. And so that you don't get yourself in a tricky budget situation that, you know, a reviewer doesn't say, oh, there's no way they're going to get it done for that price, or, you know, or, oh, they really over budgeted here and didn't justify it. So make sure, you know, if that you're not already crystal clear on how much things cost, or what a reasonable budget looks like for some of your specifics, definitely seek it and, you know, advice out on that.
Thank you, Elaina. I guess at this time, I want to welcome any other questions that you may have. There's one more that that's NHERI specific, but yes, Madeline, you want to come up? Yeah, it'll help the folks that are online. Oh, okay.
I mean, they might chime in. Hi. Yeah, exactly. Got the heads up. Mostly directed at Dr. Gouda, but if anyone has thoughts that they want to chime in. When you mentioned that kind of that finding how you're moving the field forward when you're doing applied research, that is a topic that I've thought a lot about because I'm very interested in applied research and have had trouble kind of finding that, like, how am I actually advancing the field? I was just wondering if any of you have a little bit of feedback on how you approach that if you're involved in applied research.
Since I was born, I'll start trying to take a stab at it. It was a really tough question, and I'll explain my thought process in trying to find the answer to it. And I'm sure there are multiple approaches. What I started thinking about was, I'm trying to apply something and move a product forward, fine. What exactly is holding that back from being more successful or from finding alternative solutions in terms of missing pieces of basic science that would allow, in other words, forget my product, what would be disruptive to my product, right? So whatever I'm doing in applied research, keeping the field and the application the same, how would I disrupt the field itself? And that disruption usually needs a basic science question to be answered. That was my personal approach. So that allowed me to narrow down on what the basic science approach was. And then it became a problem-solving solution about how you write a grant about tackling that as a career objective. The way that helped in writing the career proposal is now I could reformulate the entire proposal around saying, I've already spent a bunch of time in my career trying to advance this field. If I'm allowed to explore area X, I can actually disrupt and advance the field even further. So I don't think I gave up my applied roots, but I was forced to circle back and find that key piece that was required to move it forward. And it does, by default, would be an open-ended question. which suits the style of career proposal writing really well. So that's what worked for me. And I'm sure there's multiple ways to do that.
I would say similar. I mean, I also do applied research, but yeah, kind of. For me, it's what I am doing that it is like if one day it is in the market, it's going to be transformative. Like imagine 100 years from now, and I see that what I'm doing is actually applied in the clinic. What will be the difference? You know, like.
So did you have to do a lot of imagination, like imagining, or it, because I feel like Gabriela is talking about imagining the future, but then Teja, you're also talking about what's holding the field back, right? So it's barriers as well. So those barriers, like it also, like Elena's thinking about gender, right? Gender within the field, there's barriers there. So I guess those are some concrete things to consider, right? What barriers are available or unavailable, what barriers are holding back from advancement, but also what could you envision if this research was implemented in the future, what would that look like? So I think those are two different perspectives that might be intertwined, right? So I envision having more women in engineering and having all these technologies, but there are certain things that are holding that back. So you address those specifically.
I'm also very lazy. So when I've submitted grants in the past and reviews come back saying you should also know this part of basic science, I kind of built off of that, right? I mean, if you're trying to do applied research and people are like, you don't know aspect X of basic science, I'm like, cool, why don't I write a proposal to explore that? So the world is kind of telling you where you're stuck. Listen, I mean, and think about it and introspect, but that's harder. So if people are making life easier for you, take it.
I'll just add to this is, I think, getting to some of Jennifer's earlier advice about reading your proposal, you know, in addition to have other people read it, you know, talk to other people. You can ask, you know, if you're at a conference and you hear someone speaking on a topic related to your research, right? Go talk to them afterwards. And I mean, you can ask them directly, like, how do you break that down to a basic science problem? I mean, you can be really direct with asking for that mentoring advice from people too. I found, you know, so I think just talking to more people can really help you think through the problem, and you'll get all kinds of different advice and you'll get all kinds of different perspectives, but it'll help you develop kind of your sense about the problem. So I found that to be really effective too.
Jennifer or Rindum, do you want to address this question of moving?
Sure, I can add as well. I mean, you know, 5 years is a big project, but you also have to be realistic about what you can accomplish. So, you know, trying to have this broad view of the impact you're going to make, but also making sure you have kind of clear bounds on what it is that you're going to do. So I think, you know, it's always good to paint a picture of, you know, I'm going to do this, but here's all the things that this can touch. And it may be applied research, but maybe you're creating a framework or something new that can then be applied to change this and change this and change that. And you want to, you know, you always want to kind of balance these kind of big lofty goals with kind of, I mean, it's basic science, but, you know, something that's convincing, you know, that it can be achieved. And so again, while you may have the I don't want to say narrow because these are large projects, but you've got the defined scope of your project, but anywhere you can kind of tie it to open problems that it could potentially lead to solutions, I think, you know, that's a great way to show the reach of your research.
That was very well phrased. That's exactly what the proposal I wrote sounded like in terms of the big lofty scientific questions and then specific goals that are achievable, because if not, it comes back about whether it's practical. So essentially, yes, absolutely. That was very well phrased.
Okay, is there another question that you'd like to bring forward to the panel? Yes, you can come up, please.
was gonna ask, and now it's a lot of
We're making them walk, get their steps in.
Hi there. So my question is about timing of when you actually apply for the proposal. You know, I feel like I'm in this rat race of how do I get papers out? Do I actually have enough of my foot in the door with the different things that I want to apply for to go for the proposal? I'm getting pressure on me to apply for one. I don't know what to do. So any advice would be great.
So I hope you heard that question. It was based on the timeline. What do you recommend is the best timeline to apply for the proposal?
When you have a good idea ready. I mean, I went for it my 3rd year. So because you get 3 tries and it has to be before you get tenure. So that was my strategy to shift it towards the tail end of my tenure. So I started in year 3 so that, you know, I would have more developed until then. But ultimately, I mean, I think I would have applied earlier had I had a good idea. And I just didn't my first 2 years, not saying that that would be true for anybody else. But I think when you've got that idea, you know, that's the best time to write about it, it seems like to me.
I agree with that. When my first try was like my first year as an assistant professor. And I can say looking back that I was too green. I wasn't ready. You know, like I said, I wasn't as excited about my idea. I did have some external pressure to start early. And, you know, I wanted to be responsive to the mentoring I was getting, but I do question that now. I wish I'd had a little bit more time under my belt and experience.
And Jennifer, did you apply your 2nd year then again?
I feel like there was a year skipped in there somewhere. And I was at a different institution. Again, I apologize. My memory isn't super great. Actually, I opened my folder when the budget question was asked. Yes, I skipped a year after that. Yeah, got my feet under me a little bit better.
Same. I think apply on my 3rd year. I didn't apply earlier because I knew that career is a different kind of proposal and that you really need to think very well how you will integrate the teaching and outreach. And that's difficult. If you are a researcher, that's difficult to think about it. So it took me like a year of thinking or having ideas. And obviously it's not, I don't recommend it doing your first year because your first year, it is like crazy focusing in trying to adapt to the academic life. The 2nd year, maybe to build the idea, and then that's what I did.
I applied my 3rd year as well, and 3rd and then 4th. And the plan was, if it hadn't worked out, to skip one and then apply. That was the plan. Would not recommend the 1st year, mostly because I don't think the maturity to understand teaching outcomes and integration to research exists in the first cycle of teaching courses. The reason I put it that way is if you've come into a tenure track position with teaching experience or with research experience of a proposal built up, what I say may not hold water. But if you're starting out fresh and you're offering or designing the first set of classes, you refine it your own 2nd time teaching them. And that maturity really helps writing the outreach aspect of a career proposal. So the earliest I would do it, even looking backwards, would be my 2nd year. And I would plan that you can get all 3 submissions in if required with at least a year break. So if you do it in 2, then you can decide how to space that break and then have your 3 shots before you go on. That was more of my strategic side than my honest side answer.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question because it's NHERI specific. This was submitted to us earlier as well. While our Summer Institute participants, our in-person group, if they have other questions, they can think about them. But did any of you integrate NHERI facilities into your proposals? And if so, how did you do that?
NHERI did not exist when I submitted my proposal. I mean, I suppose NIST did, but it wasn't earthquake related.
So did you, I guess, just more general, how did you incorporate facilities, if, you know, the facilities that you used for your proposal?
Well, so I just had the kind of standard what was available in my lab, what I purchased with my startup. Is pretty standard. I don't know that I can relate it to NHERI. I can kind of come at this from a different angle. So as somebody who's involved in a NHERI experimental facility, I would say that if you do have an idea that could potentially use one of the facilities, that's such a, you know, we keep talking about get lots of people to look at your proposal. When you go to write a proposal at an experimental NHERI facility, you now have a built-in panel of people that want you to be successful. And so you've got more people that can read it. You know, the experimental facilities are successful when they bring in really good transformative research. And so definitely, you know, it's just an added benefit of proposing work at the facilities is you're going to have them in your court helping you with your proposal development. So looking at it from a different side.
I proposed Design Safe CI to store all of my data on and to publish, you know, different documents to and I also proposed to use the Sim Center and would just echo what Jennifer said, because that was really nice, being able to interact with some of the representatives, the PI of the Sim Center, and talk about, you know, my idea and where the Sim Center was at in development at that point, and where they, you know, were going, so that, you know, I didn't say something in the proposal that didn't match that, right, that conflicted, and just talk through, and it helped me make sure I had a grounded understanding of what that facility could do too. So I learned a lot more about it as well. So yeah, I thought I've had meetings with them, but we haven't gotten to the stage in the research yet that was supposed to use it yet. But anyway, so I just agree with Jennifer that was super helpful.
And we have all the facilities descriptions, the data management plan. Like there's a lot that we can help with in addition to developing the idea. There's a lot that we can contribute to that process.
I also have a question about integrating broader impacts, because Rindum pointed to this about connecting the education or, you know, outreach to the research. So Rindum, how did you do that? I know you mentioned that you read a lot, but did you talk to others outside of you know, the journals that you read? And if so, how did you make those connections? Was that something that you were interested in? Or did you go and look at the need around your community as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I don't know if the solicitation contains that as of now. At my time, it said like you have to, it's better to put your career proposal in perspective of the vision of your own institution, right? So when I was reading all these journals, I found out that the undergrad education retention is a big problem because half of the students leave after 1 year. So then I looked at my university and saw that they have the same problem. And they started active learning course curriculum using physics. And they also established something which is called Institute of Global Learning and Global Citizenship. And they have an umbrella organization. So I went there, I learned from them how they're applying active learning to their classrooms and increasing the retention and graduation rates and everything. And those are the resources I got from my university. And I think Teja talked about assessment. So I selected the main person, Hilary Landorf, from that Global Learning Institute as to do the assessment of my educational outcomes. So I kind of connected with them to know like how this can impact. And then we developed this new hurricane engineering and global sustainability course, which is kind of directly now tied into the wall of wind. So it has a nice way of, we teach the students in the class about hurricane engineering, and then we hire them as learning assistants to work at the wall of wind, get experience in natural hazards engineering, and then go back and teach, become learning assistant for the next class because they have already taken the class. So that's the model. Or all of those ideas came from my institution and talking with the people who are expert in these global learning, active learning, and those kind of things.
Thank you, Arindam. Others want to share how they made those connections and between research and broader impacts?
I went down the list of centers and institutes available at my university, and whoever replied back to me, I figured out a way to integrate them to my research. So the way I was thinking about it, and there was a logic and a rationale to it, as flippant as I sounded. Basically having a center or an institute means that they had written a federal grant and gotten it funded, which means they had thought about the student outcomes and what they were doing. And the piece that I had to move forward was to explain how I would integrate into their ecosystem. And then they would give me the piece that integrated them into my career proposal, right? So that's how I kind of made that bridge. Most of these centers and institutes have the responsibility of reaching out to the constituents of the population they're serving, which means the students and the faculty have to participate actively with them for their own mission needs. And they were going to provide me back with what was in their funded job description to provide me back with. So in other words, you don't have to convince a partner to partner with you if it serves both interests, right? So there is a give and take that's inherent in reaching out to these institutes. They already exist. They already, as Arindam pointed out, have the boilerplate of how they're going to assess outcomes, of how they're going to actually have a pathway or pipeline. So it doesn't sound like I'm going to develop a course. You've actually worked out the entire fit in the ecosystem. It explains how you're going to be a good citizen faculty member of your institution. And it also shows why your institution and these centers and institutes now have a vested interest in your success in your career proposal, because it feeds in one to the other. So that was how I kind of built my story. I got 3 different centers or institutes that I would not normally have associated with, explain how they fit and what we would each get from the other, and how that would make the overall ecosystem function better. So that was my rationale for it.
Well, mine was similar, but not exactly the same. So when I started my academic position, Dean Browning had a grant to transform engineering education, and she partnered me with someone from education, since it will be my first time teaching, and it will be a first time ever taught course, to develop that course with already building active learning strategies. And she partnered me with Robin, that is around there too. And they helped me to develop a flipped classroom. And they were already evaluating the active learning in the classroom. So for my career, the logical thing was to, okay, what I'm teaching was very close to the basic concepts of the research that I'm doing. So I just moved forward. Okay, we have done the evaluation of the active learning in the classroom. Now, what we have not been doing is the evaluation of, is this working for students? Are really students learning differently through these strategies? So I just advance that. What I have done before, I just move it forward to, okay, this is the evaluation of, it is working in the classroom, but are they really learning? And that's what I propose in my career. And also, I keep working with the same team, which is the PhD advisor of Robin. I keep working on with him for that part.
Yeah, so you almost had like a pilot. You were an active participant in this pilot as well.
Participant, but not really like a developer or anything. I was just part of the transformation, and I just build up on that I was already working.
Yeah. Others want to share their experience connecting research with broader impacts?
Yeah, my experience was very similar. I think I kind of led with this when we started out, but leveraging the resources are there. They already have the assessment tools in place. So one thing I can add though is I reached out to the College of Journalism, and they had an again, the kind of theme here is existing programs, but they had an existing certificate for science communication. And that's what I really brought in terms of my education and outreach is, bridging that gap between the science that we do. And, I'm in civil engineering, in particular infrastructure. And, there's a lot of kind of public perception and even policy issues that come into play with funding for the type of science problems I'm trying to address. And so for my particular case, the College of Journalism was a great fit. They had an existing certificate program and they were interested in bringing more engineers into their program, not just communications majors. So kind of going back to what Teja was saying about, what's in it for them. And, their eyes kind of lit up with that possibility. So that's how I approached it.
One of the things I don't know the people in the room and if this is relevant or not, but one of the things, like my research was really trying to integrate disciplines. I was trying to bring together civil engineering and systems engineering and sociology and planning and a little economics. And so it was trying to bring all these things together, and the ultimate kind of application-based outcome is basically it would become the underlying structure of like a community resilience code or standard. And so, I mean, that's a crazy moonshot goal, right? But, I'm a civil engineering professor, civil structural. And so what I did was I had an advisory panel. And one of the people in my advisory panel was an engineering education expert. So that helped me, helped show that my teaching was going to be, assessed, or it helped, substantiate that. It also, though, I had Don Scott, who's the ASCE XCOM chair of the Codes and Standards Division of ASCE, right? And so he was also, a subcommittee chair of ASCE 7. So he's someone who knows all about the codes and standards process, who's going to be on my advisory committee now. And I had about 6 or 7 people in my advisory committee, and all of them had core expertise in the different disciplines I was trying to bring together, so that I wasn't, while I was reading literature and I was definitely, trying to do a good job being true to all of those disciplines, I also showed, hey, here I am, a 3rd-year professor, thinking I can work across all these spaces, but, I am going to have people who that really is their strength, make sure that it's, that they help keep me in line with that too, and help me disseminate the research findings across a very broad audience with some particular expertise, like I said, and in that realm that I wanted to go towards, codes and standards. So I think all my reviewers and the panel called that out. So I think that it was particularly helpful in my case.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, if there is one from anyone in the room. Yeah, come on up and ask so that everyone could hear, everyone who's online.
Hi, so I have a very general question. Why did you decide to apply for a career award? What I understand is at any given point of time, there are multiple reports and proposals due, and this takes, as you said, this is a different proposal. It must have been very time consuming. So what made you apply for it? And was it the research freedom you would get with this award, or was it the prestigious name? And how did it help you with your tenure track career?
So a lot of questions were asked. Were you able to hear those? Okay. Anyone want to start?
I don't feel like I had a choice. It was heavily encourage. I started out at Texas Tech University and then I ended up at University of Florida, and I would say the pressure was there at both. Again, it never occurred to me not to, so maybe that's just the institutional culture. Yeah, I'm not sure if there were a lot of questions in there, but
Yeah.
and I
So-
think it is a prestigious, you know, as it's been said several times, there's something about a career award that's going to really look great when you go up for tenure, and it you know, it's, yeah, the prestige that goes with it. But again, it didn't occur to me not to.
And Jennifer, do you think this also helped with your tenure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, I came to the University of Florida and they said, well, you know, everybody before you has gotten one, like in the structures group, like, you know, batting 100. And I thought, well, I mean, it's, again, that it kind of goes back to, this is what we do. So.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. I mean, before I knew what a career proposal was, I knew that I was going to apply for it because my PhD advisor had already primed me to say, you know, when you go on your job search, make sure you tell them you're going to go after the career award. I was like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I trust you, so I'm going to say it. Right? And that was, you know, and it was definitely like an expectation when, you know, your research aligns with NSF funding, the department, the school, they really, you know, push it too. And so that's definitely where I think it absolutely helped me with tenure. I mean, I'm an assistant professor now, but I'll be associate in the fall. So I did get promotion and tenure, and I think it definitely helped a lot. I don't think it was the only thing. Like, I don't think you can get a career award and not do all the other things, right? But it was definitely important. It definitely helped. It definitely helped give me a lot more confidence that things were going to work out. So that was good. Yeah, but I'll say after having it, what you talked about, the person who asked the question, that research freedom, I mean, being able to write a proposal on what you want to spend your career doing and then being able to do that research, I mean, that is the best. I mean, I've liked all my collaborative projects, but my career research is definitely my favorite. And so it's a lot of fun to be able to have that to do. So yeah, carve your name out and exactly where you want to carve your name.
I'll just go really quickly, but yes, the career proposal is pretty career changing, no pun intended. It definitely helps achieve what you want as your goals, but more importantly, sometimes when you like a lot of things, it also helps crystallize exactly what you want your contribution to be. I believed it more after I got the career than when I wrote it. So it's that freedom definitely helps with all the other aspects of your tenure and progression. But more than that, it's an award. So the next time you apply after having been a winner, that line on your resume also gives your biosketch a lot of credibility. Right? So it's worth applying just for that reason as well, in addition to all the other ups. Because you really have nothing to lose. I mean, in academia, you live and die by grants, so why not?
And I want to add something, it's not the money.
It's
Because for people that we do biological research, the career is not that good money for us. So it is more the prestigious. And I don't have tenure, but
now is the time. Yeah.
We have the dean here, so.
If I may add to that one line, I think it also paves the path for you to become a good mentor for other people. Once you have the career, you know the integration, you have the experience, you can kind of, like this panel, right? So we are sharing all our inputs. I think it's kind of mentoring other people, young generation, to get their career awards, because we kind of have gone through the process, we know. So like the Wall of Wind has probably now 5 or about 5 career awardees who are working on different projects. And at some point of time we interacted, and that I think is another part of it. So it's not only your success, but you can help others to succeed in career proposals as well once you know how it's done.
Wow, and that's actually a great point for us to end, because all of our panelists are in their way. This is their service to mentoring all of us. So thank you all. Can you help me to thank the panelists?